Well, welcome to another episode of Beyond Coaching with the Impactful Coaching Project. Have an interesting guest with me today. He doesn't know me, but I've been persistent in saying I got to learn from you. We got David Shapiro. He's the president and CEO of the YMCA in the greater Boston area. And prior to that was the CEO of Mentor, a national mentoring partnership where he helped shape national policy, mentoring movement, and champion equity and access for young people everywhere. And our background, I heard him speak at a breakfast, and about halfway through, my wife texted me, who was there, and said, "He's your people. You need to invite him on the podcast." And then here we are. So, anyways, David, thanks for taking the time.
This is really the modern world where kindred spirits find themselves on
Yeah.
podcasts. I
Well, I saw
appreciate
my wife's text because I was taking notes so fast, trying to keep up, and I think
I'm glad you follow your wife's directions. That's
there
impactful
you go.
coaching right there.
15 years of marriage and going strong because of that. Well, why don't you share, if you can start out, just a little bit of your background, how it connects to mentoring, and how you got. I mean, hearing you talk, it was obviously a lifelong passion for you. Just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably at the time, if you asked me, I wouldn't have known it, but I grew up with relational privilege and a lot. I think one because I fit into an archetype for male student athletes. Um, I went to a private all boys school in Baltimore City, so that structurally set me up for a lot. I mean, it's not that there weren't some bad mentors too, but a lot of adult attention, a lot of adult support, a lot of people asking you, what do you want to do? What are you trying to pursue? I'm not sure I thought that was a rarity or a privilege. I now realize what a great privilege that was. And then as I played sports in college, baseball and football at Amherst College, um, I began just kind of realizing and reflecting that sports were the most egalitarian and diverse settings in which I was, and trying to think about how you do that for a living. And I thought about teaching and coaching, but doing that in public schools for something like Teach for America was not really well developed at that point. So I would have done that in a private school, and that was of less interest to me for a variety of reasons. And then I got connected. And this is where the story is weird, but I got connected to Tiger Woods. I started working on the foundation, and became just awakened to the world of the nonprofit sector. I fell in love with the nonprofit sector. Um, and now on my fifth stop in the nonprofit sector with 1 year in professional sports and baseball with my brother. Um, I have kind of worked mostly in youth development, mostly in mentoring, as you said, mostly in a role that had me more doing management, leadership, fundraising, not on the ground doing these things. A lifetime of raising boys with my incredible wife and coaching a lot of youth sports, especially baseball, a little bit of flag football, and a little bit opening doors for hockey players, even though I can't skate. Um, and that just kind of led me into like the youth development, mentoring world, coaching world. Um, and now at the Y, it's like a whole new ball game because we serve really people 0 to 100, and it's all kinds of different things we do here at the Y. But recreation, health, and wellness is certainly at the core
Yeah,
as
well,
well.
I don't want to take us off on a tangent too far right away, but people are going to want to know how you know Tiger Woods. What's that? Give us the 1 minute version of that story.
There is no like, fun explanation there except like I knew a guy who knew a guy. I was playing uh football and baseball at Amherst. My O-line coach was very involved in junior golf, and everyone who was involved in junior golf knew this guy who was going to be the next great, and he knew him. And I talked to him about this aspiration to do something at sort of the cross section of sports and public service or philanthropy, of which in the sports that I loved, football and baseball, there really wasn't much going
Mhm.
on at this point in the late 90s. Corporate social responsibility was not a term. Um, and so like baseball had a marketing arrangement with boys and girls clubs, and football had one with the United Way, but like no one worked on any programming or anything. And he said, like, there's this guy, and he's going to try to change the face of golf through philanthropy and public service. And if you want to meet him, I can help you out. So
Tiger
that's how
Woods.
that
Cool.
happened.
So so when I heard you talk, I'd say I'm passionate about mentoring, but not well studied in it, if that makes any sense. You use some terms.
It does.
So you talked about, and I think our audience, a lot of parents, a lot of coaches that are passionate about impacting young people. So you talked about developmental mentoring, but also which is relational, friendship based. But then you talked about instrumental mentoring. Uh, Dive into that a little
Yes.
bit because I think at times, no, I not at times, mentoring is more complex than people think when we're talking about working with student athletes as a coach. So, can you dive into that a little bit about instrumental mentoring?
Yeah. I mean, one, to your point about knowing a lot about it, I think there's probably nothing I found that people are more overconfident about than mentoring. Because again, it's not a bad thing, but you've done it for somebody. It's probably been magical. What you probably don't realize is that you had some
Mhm,
connection. It's your nephew or someone asked you to take a kid under his wing, or you're already in an authority position or a structural position like coaching, and then you mentor. When someone says like, Rob, go mentor Dave, he's a stranger, it's just a very different experience, and a lot of preparation and structure and support is generally
mhm,
needed, and so it will humble you very fast. Um, the instrumental mentoring is really where we build a relationship, but around skill building, around we're gonna build a robot together in a STEM competition. Um, the skill building portion, the imparting of knowledge, the goal orientation is the lead, and relationship might be a
mhm,
lag. Um, but both may happen. And if at the end of building the robot, we didn't like make a connection, like you're like, that guy taught me a lot about building a robot. I don't like want to be like him or ever talk to him again, but like he imparted a lot of knowledge to me. We would still have
yeah,
been
that's great.
successful. Um, if we did both, then I would say it's instrumental mentoring because we built a relationship and we completed a task. There are coaches, lots of the best ones, who would invert those two and say, in order to be a good instrumental mentor, you need to lead with relationship, not outcome. Um, I happened to be when I was talking, in Wichita and saw you on the stage with, RC Buford, which was really lucky. And it's relevant to, Pop, who just retired and is moving into the front office. Popovich, the Spurs legendary basketball coach, is famous for sort of like knowing guys care about wine or whatever thing
Mhm,
they care about, knowing the countries they came from, and trying to build a relationship. They're obviously trying to win an NBA championship. Like there's an
yeah,
instrumental thing there, but he knows the way there is relationship. So that's developmental is literally, it's just like Rob and David, you guys go be
mhm.
friends. Like do something once a month and you will develop a relationship. But that's the only goal, is the relationship as an end unto
So in
itself.
our kinda one thing we talk about, which some people I think most people agree with on some level, but some disagree. So, transformational leadership, transformational coaching. Everybody gets all excited about the idealistic impact you have. And we're of the belief, and I've found some research that the transactional relationship has to come first, meaning I do what I say, you do what you say. And when that happens, trust is built and we can move on to the relationship. Would that be similar to what you're saying in some ways?
I think that's totally right. I think that's totally right. I think what I will say is just like, we just have to remember the developmental mind, which is like an 8-year-old doesn't necessarily know that covenant. They do know when a person shows up when they're supposed
Mhm,
to, and they do know when it's fun to be with them. And depending on what their life has told them, that might be a difference than other times, and a really positive thing could be a negative thing and be another abandonment. Whereas, like with a 16-year-old, like we can actually have a
mhm,
covenant and really hold each other accountable in a different way for that relationship. So some of it's just the developmental acuity and milestones of the mentee or of one of the people in the
mhm.
relationship. But yeah, no, you're totally doing the things we say we're gonna do are foundational, and yet once again, something that is hard for
Yeah.
people, so can be a separator.
So this is something I've thought about for years, don't have a good answer because I see a lot of well-meaning coaches. I think I was this. My background, I coached college baseball for 10 years before getting into what I'm doing now. And I think I was really good at getting behavior change, but not heart change.
Yep.
And I would say
Hmm.
good mentoring gets to the heart change. Um, Curious your thoughts on that, for a coach, because I think that's where the power dynamic really comes in of, if I'm a coach, most kids are
Yes.
gonna do what I say, but are they doing that because they wanna play, or if there's some deeper below the surface stuff going on? So, what advice would you have for coaches trying to have that deeper level impact and avoid just, "Well, I made an impact," but really they just got somebody that wants to start at second base, so they're gonna do what they say.
Right. Yeah. I think that what's hard, and I would say, Rob, we talked about
Mhm,
humility, earlier. I have to have some humility around what it's like. I mean, I have a son who's a college baseball player, so I'm seeing this firsthand. But what it's like when, results orientation is a very real and central part of
mhm,
everything. Like, I coach 10-year-olds. Like, I really could, like, reward the kid that tried the hardest, and I could also talk to the best player about, like, "Hey, man, if you're not a good teammate, then I don't really care how good you
mhm,
are." Like, and I could really make a point with a 12-year-old. When you are literally being paid to win games and, like, maybe if there's a tiebreaker, it goes to the kid that worked the hardest, but, like, if you got a guy who's just getting results and another guy who's just an amazing human, but it's just not getting results, like, I've never had to
yep,
confront that as a coach. No, I just wanna be honest about that. Um, I do think, like, you know, failure is the best teaching. It is also abundant in baseball, and nobody doesn't do it
mhm,
in any sport, but in baseball, those of us who like to torment ourselves experience it more than anywhere else. I think the hard work is done in those moments. So, I think have you established the kind of trust and caring that in the vulnerable failure moments, a player will feel you have their best interest at heart. Because if you only come to them in the moments of failure, they're gonna think you're after changing the
mhm,
results. But if you tell them like, "Look, I remember who you are and who you were and what kind of results you got at other times, and this is a moment where I still believe in you. I'm gonna give you a day off today." Ah, that's BS. You just wanna see if that guy's gonna get better results. Well, if I know you really care about me, I actually might trust that you really do think me getting a mental break is you
yeah.
care about me. Like, that's really you say what you mean. Like, but I just think, like, they've got to believe that you're invested in them so that the hard work is done when the times are dark, but we're also the least trusting when the times are dark. So, you better build a relationship when the times are good that holds people accountable, that doesn't dismiss all behaviors because of winning, that sort of does show you to be a consistent human with interest in humans. Like, reveal yourself in the good times so that in the dark times you can do hard work.
One of the quotes I had from your talk, "Establish trust in the quiet moments to create a foundation."
Yes.
So,
Yes. We are drawn to dramatic moments and nothing happens in dramatic
well, it's
moments.
so interesting because I started to say this often, but I said it yesterday to somebody, like, I feel conflicted a lot in my job because we wanna win, that's important, I think putting our best foot forward matters, but the most transformational moments I see are when things go to crap. And kids need to deal with a
Yeah.
role they don't have, or that's where the coach's role really matters, and where growth happens, or 3 of the starters get hurt and all of a sudden we stink, and you can have some really successful seasons, but they're not high in the win column, and, yeah, I don't know if I had a question at the end of that, but it lines up with what you're saying. That's yeah.
No, it's a great point. And I think, like, when you think about establishing
Mhm.
culture, when you think about building a program, and obviously this is what's become more difficult in modern college sports and even modern high school sports with all the shifting around of
Yeah.
players. But there's a lot of people who tell stories about like the go back to the Spurs who were a dynasty. The Spurs weren't built when they first won an NBA
Mhm.
championship. They were built when like, I don't know when, because I wasn't a part of that story, but they were probably built when they first started thinking about the international draft. They were probably built when they drafted David Robinson, who was, like, older and coming out of a military academy, and some people passed him by because they were like, "He's gonna have less years of
Mhm.
playing," but they were, like, leadership skills, great human, ability to build around culturally. Who cares if we have him 3 less great years as a player? I mean, I don't know what the decisions were, but it might be when guys bought in because they saw the coach care about a guy who just blew out his elbow just as much as he cares about a number one guy. And they were like, holy crap. And they started telling recruits, like, you should have seen this guy. Like, he spent days with a dude who just blew out his arm instead of our
Mhm.
ace because he just actually cares about us. So, like, they are, I mean, I think if you think about building a team over 4 years instead of one
Mhm.
year, then like winning does happen in quiet and dark moments. And you won the NCAA championship in '94, but the inflection point might have been in
Yeah.
'90,
That's
you
mhm.
know?
Yeah, 'cause it certainly takes talent to win, obviously, but, yeah, once you get to the point of playing for a championship, this has to be the difference maker. The relationships, the trust, the being able to communicate in the stress of the moment, that has to come down to some of the stuff we're talking about.
I think so. I mean, right, it's easy to be cynical in this
Mhm.
day and age, especially in a sport with less players on the field or court, like basketball, where maybe if you just get the best 5 guys in the transfer portal, like, you catch lightning in a bottle. But, like, I don't know. I mean, and again, maybe the goal isn't anymore to build programs, um, but I still think, like, to sustain success, even if you're changing out a lot of the
Mhm.
players, like, you still have to have somewhat of a consistent approach and system
I'm
and
citing an article, I can't remember what it was, so take that for what it's worth, but I remember reading an article about the teams in the Final Four this year, and they had more guys stick around than, like, the average team. They still had the transfer,
Yep.
but they had these guys that had foundational relationships, that had stuck around 2, 3 years, and that was the backbone of their team, not the person that just comes in. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and, like, there's the 5 guys that are playing, right? But there's 5 guys that have to work their ass off scrimmaging against them in practice. And those are guys that probably are never going into the transfer portal, or somehow you're getting them to buy in for the year before they go into the transfer portal because, like, maybe they're already saying, like, "Yeah, I gotta get out of
Mhm.
here and go somewhere else," but somehow you're getting them to care that, like, if you guys are a great scout team this year, we still could win a championship, you know? So, like, it is gonna take more than the best few guys, and you are gonna have to be invested in everybody and show some level of care. I mean, there's no question there's more transactional nature to all of sports than ever before. I would even argue the 12-year
Mhm.
olds because, like, if I'm paying an AAU coach to coach my son, that's really different. And my expectations, I'm now a customer and not like just a member of the community who trusts another parent to coach my child in Little League. So there's no question youth sports has become more
Mhm.
transactional, but still holds the
Yes.
possibility of being all very developmental. You need to approach it that way, even if you're
And it has to be on the coaching end, on the management end. I'm thinking, like, the college level, so intentional to pull it off.
yes,
So, I was telling you before we went on, we're in the middle of end of year evaluations for our programs, and a few years ago, um, we have many different questions on topics there, but some of them are about practices, and it's practices are productive, motivating, and engaging. That score dropped 2, 3, 4 years ago, and coach's response was, "Well, these kids are doing the club stuff, they come in, they don't know how to practice, they get bored." And
right.
and it's so easy for my seat now that I'm not coaching because it's an easy response of, "That's great, but it's who you got. How are you adjusting?" And, and coaches have, but it took they had to ask. They asked their kids, "How do we do? How do we go
Right.
about it?" And the relationship piece is what kinda took the day on that. Wanna shift gears a little bit. So my Dustin Gallion's my co-founder in the impactful coaching project we're doing, and it's somewhat founded out of he became a head college coach at 24. I became a head college coach at 26, and we didn't have the foggiest idea what we were doing, and we couldn't find a lot of resources. So we have all this pretty expensive experience. So we're like, heck, if we could share something with somebody, all the power to it. So I'm curious your advice. I think back to when I was that age, and finding mentors was a challenge. And I was pretty
Mhm.
intimidated to pick up the phone and call. And even now, I'll get calls on the other end from aspiring ADs, college students that kind of want to meet, but then the relationship's hard because they're not sure what they want out of the deal other than they know they want to be an AD. So you provided some good insight, I thought, when I heard you talk on number one, being a good mentor, but also how do you develop that relationship as the mentee? So if you could dive into that a little bit, I think that'd be helpful to our audience.
Yeah. I think, again, like, we want to be you used the word a second ago, intentional. We want to be liked, and we want to organically connect so badly that we lean on that too heavily instead of just, like, we think there's something sterile and unfeeling about saying, like, "Look, this is what I'm hoping to get out of
Mhm,
this." But, like, it would actually help really liberate me as a mentor to know what your expectations are. And mentoring is a very loaded word. So if I just say, like, "Rob, you're an AD. I want you to mentor me on becoming an AD. I live in Iowa." You're gonna definitely either say no or be like, "I don't even know where to start. What do you
mm,
mean?" But if I said, "Rob, like, I'm an aspiring AD from Iowa. Would you spend an hour with me on the phone so I can understand more what you did to prepare for your position?" You're gonna say yes, and then once we spend, or you might say, "I have a half an hour." And then if I say, "Hey, man, if I could get myself to friends, could I shadow you for a day?" "Yeah,
mhm,
sure." "If you had 2 other ADs that you think would impart wisdom to me, would you connect me to?" Well, now I'm
mhm.
doing it, and I could lay all that out at the beginning instead of, like, dripping it
Yeah,
out, but I may not know what I need. And so I just think it's like breaking it down into bite-sized pieces instead of saying, like, "Will you be my mentor? Will you mentor me?" It's hard to know what that means. So force yourself. It's almost a little bit of a lazy crutch. There's I say this to our team right now about, like, there's all this debate about words, right? DEI and everything. It's like, I don't care about the words. Let's just not be
what?
lazy about the
Yeah,
language. Maybe we've started using initials as a
mm,
crutch. Let's describe what we mean. If we come back to those same words, I don't care. I'm not scared of any words. I'm scared of words and phrases that we're using as a crutch. So let's just, like, I think mentoring and mentor, I'm very excited that it's so positive in the lexicon, but become a lazy word. And so I think my advice would just be, like, if you're getting into that relationship, first of all, decide, is it a mentoring event or a mentoring relationship? Because it may just be that I want to talk to you
mhm,
once.
and that's
Um,
okay. Yeah, I remember you
so
saying, like, "That's okay."
that's
That
okay.
felt freeing
Yeah,
for me to hear.
that's
Yeah,
okay. It's fine. But that might be all I intend, and I ask you to be my mentor. And you're like, "No, dude, I don't have time to be someone's mentor when all I really want to do is have one
yeah,
conversation with you." But just try to be a little bit more precise about what would be helpful, and then ask the person if they're willing to do that rather than just, like, using these big
mhm.
terms.
Well, what about as the person being approached to be the mentor? Do you think that person how do I say it? That does it set the relationship up to fail if I'm providing that guidance when somebody reaches out to me? So I'm envisioning all these emails of, like, responding like, "What do you want out of this? How long?" But it gets pretty transactional. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kinda learned this from my pop because he was in the sports business and people would always, contact him about getting into the sports business. He did require of people, like, a certain amount of
Mhm,
legwork. Like, "I'm really curious about what you're seeking to get out of this, what your background is," like, just a few basic questions. And to be honest, I think it also probably did eliminate half the people who weren't willing to do that work, and it was like, well, why would I want to be in a relationship with this person who's not willing to do the work? But if they were willing to do the work, he would talk to
Yeah.
anybody. So I think it's not bad to ask those questions that honor your
Mhm.
time. They shouldn't be overly onerous. They should just make the entry point in the relationship a little bit more intentional. And if they happen to siphon some people off, that's probably a good thing in the end to protect the commodity of your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, protect us from some awkwardness.
Yeah, yeah, and some people not knowing why they're getting into a relationship
Yeah,
or a conversation with a
yeah.
stranger.
And it's not as sexy as a lot of other stuff with mentoring what we talked about, but I think that's just such a on both sides, the mentor and the mentee, such a practical piece of advice people can take from this is define the relationship.
Yes, and that if you do it from a standpoint of assuming good intent and, like, this is just so we can both honor the
Yeah.
time together. It's not like, my time is so precious, I need you to answer these 3 questions, or whenever someone approaches me, I ask them to it's not a snobby thing, it's just like, I want us to get the most out of this, so can you tell me 1, 2, and 3? On either side. On the other side, I'm asking for your time. I want to use it wisely. I'd love to explore X, Y, and Z, but, like, it's honoring time as a commodity. Like, it's a respectful thing, not a
Yeah, well
snobby
said.
thing.
I got one more question, then we always end with a, kind of a series of questions to get to know you better. So, I'm curious, I'm assuming you've had some great mentors in your life if you're passionate about it. So, I'm curious, um, pick first person that pops into your head that was a mentor. What was one thing they did that really stuck with you?
Man. Um, I think, I had a mentor in work who, you know, was I gravitated to a lot of mentors in work who were a lot like what I grew up with, what my dad was like sort of what I thought my mom was like, what I thought success was. Basically, good human
Mhm.
relators because my mom and dad one is a great human relator. Um, I I had an early mentor when I first became an executive director of a nonprofit, a board chair who was a board chair of a Fortune 100 company. And he I think the time is commodity thing. Like he was like, "Look, man, I will do anything you need me to do to be helpful, but I have 15 minutes." Like it's going to be in 15-minute
Hmm.
increments. So I need you to write bullets. I need you to be direct about what you need, all that kind of stuff. And then he still made room for like, you know, how your kid's doing a little bit. I mean, he was feeling, but time was a huge commodity for him. And my dad was always like very generous with his time, kind of like dialogue, different kind of
Yeah.
man. And this guy was a mathematician by training who ran an insurance company. So it was a very
Mhm.
different skill set. And I think Ted just taught me that, like, one, how to honor people's time by getting to the point quickly, and that there's something loving and caring about that too. It doesn't have to be 40 minutes of getting to know
Yeah.
each other. And also that, like, that's not unfeeling, I guess, being disciplined and structured in that way. And I hadn't. And by the way, and I just end with this on this point. By the way, when he shifted gears, like when I had to let somebody go and it was hurting me to my core, and he said, "Hey, the day it doesn't hurt to do this, you should look in the mirror because you've lost your humanity." Like, those were, like, the most poignant moments ever because he didn't seem as oozing with humanity as, like, my dad, so and other men and women that I knew. So, he almost taught me even more about being human because, but anyway, it was just learning from a different way to go about things, that, that was he was a great
Well,
mentor in that way.
it's interesting as you were talking, I had a he's passed now, but a very powerful mentor in my freshman year of college, and a guy named Baker Duncan. And he was so different than anybody I've ever met. But it was the part I never really thought about till now that probably made it go is the expectations were so clear. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. And yeah, I
Yes.
think that's a great takeaway for me in this conversation. So All right, well,
Yeah.
I owe you an apology before rapid fire round. I forgot to send you the questions. Usually, I let people prep. So, I'll edit out anything that, that sounds too bad. So here's the rule.
Yeah.
You have no longer than 30 seconds, speaking of concise communication, no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of these questions. Ready?
Okay.
All right. What is one
Yep.
book that has greatly influenced your life?
The leadership moment.
Leadership moment. Why?
Because it said that there were not ingredients for necessarily all great leadership, but that there were moments that called people to be great leaders. And they called on the things that those moments
Cool.
asked for.
Do you have a favorite failure that helped you develop?
So many. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the first time I tried to give some guy tough advice about not always criticizing, but sometimes kind of killing him with kindness. And he explained to me that like the way he grew up was different than the way I grew up, and that he didn't expect people to respect his voice as much. So he was always kind of
Mm.
fighting his way out. And I realized that, like, yeah, I pretty much expect everybody to value my voice and me. And that makes me come from a different place than a lot of other people.
Wow, that's good. Um,
Yeah, it was really helpful.
how do you define success in your work?
Anything that's lasting and sustainable, honestly, whether it's a relationship or a program, or I just think it's pretty easy to do something once and much harder to sustain something, especially in a business that's not like I'm in a world that's not built on wealth generation, which is obviously what most of the American financial, political, and system is built. So I don't get to look at people and say, like, Rob, I made you money, give me five more bucks. Like I'm trying to create programs that economically will like survive and are delivering good services to usually people that don't pay for them. So sustainability of keeping people investing in them, keeping people delivering them, like it's just a lot of stakeholders that aren't all as connected as they are in the for profit. And so I just think being able to do things for
Mhm.
years is a really big separator.
Other than this one, what's your favorite podcast?
Uh, I like the Daily Stoic. I'm into stoicism. My brother turned me
I'm
on
a
to
listener as
stoicism.
well.
Yeah, so I like him. And politically, there's a g I lean a little to the left, so there's a guy, Ezra Klein, that
Mhm.
I listen to that says some
Yeah.
interesting things, especially in this moment, but those are probably 2 of the people I listen
Cool,
to,
cool.
so
Well, last one, I'll say it twice because it's a little more complicated. So, looking at the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? So, in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
yeah. I'm gonna take 2 things if
That
that's
is fine.
okay. COVID got me to become a reader and mimic my wife, a reader of books. I was a reader of periodicals and especially nonfiction, but I'm now always reading a fiction book for the most part, and it just kind of enriches my life. I just read the book James, which is Mark Twain written through Jim's eyes, the enslaved person, instead of, Huckleberry Finn's. So that was just a beautiful book, and I recommend that to anyone. But it just kind of opens me up, and it's a distraction, and it helps me fall asleep. And so reading has been a behavior, and then I think probably at a larger level that people might, take is presence. I think like I was one of those guys who was raised on the multitasking as a superpower. I still think compartmentalizing and being able to juggle a lot and synthesize a lot is a superpower, but to in that moment lock in, I especially say this to working parents. A lot of men say to me, like when they just had a kid, like, I just want to keep killing it at work and killing it at home. And I'm like, two things. One, try to be very good at home and very good at work. You don't need to be
Mhm.
killing it. Like most people are killing it at the sacrifice of the other. It's very hard to kill it in both. And then two, like just try to be present when you're working and present when you're fathering. Like, that will make you very
Yeah.
good. Because I spent a long time trying to do both and even both at the same time, and again, mimicking other successful people I'd seen, I thought that was a superpower, and I really try to just be present as much as I can and try to do that thing really well when I'm doing it. It's freaking hard, but I work at that practice a
That's
lot.
that's good. Well, I, appreciate you taking the time. It's both times when I heard you talk and talking now, I just admire you have a practical, logical mind, and I think I really appreciate how you think.
Well, I appreciate that, and, like, I feel like we are kindred spirits in the podcast and world of Kansas and Massachusetts, and I think, like, we need this. We need conversations about relationship, about deeper
Yep.
humanity. We're not always called to deeper humanity, especially in the civic for right now. It's a lot about conquest and a lot about transaction. So just to be able to delve more deeply and know that you're working at an institution and with a lot of human shapers who are thinking the same and striving for the same, that it's huge, huge admiration and respect for
Thanks
me.
so
So
much. Cool. Well, we'll wrap up there, and thanks again for the time.
thanks so much, Rob. Take care, man.